Okay. It's your favorite man-child, back with your favorite child man, Vicious E, and guess who? That's right, baby motherfucking Yoda. Back in this bitch. How's it going, everybody? I think I'm just sober enough to maybe pull this off today. So, let's see. Let's do it. Just gonna watch some Assange shit. Hey, Karen and Propaganda. Good to see you guys. Let me put the chat over here so I can see it. Yeah, how's everybody doing? And let me see. Oh, no, I didn't want that. Here we are. Good lord. I wanted to check this one out real quick, actually, because I thought this was funny. It kind of tripped me out. Julian Assange
outside the self-imposed confinement and monotony that was Julian Assange's life for 7 years. A security camera shows the rooms inside the Ecuadorian embassy where the WikiLeaks founder languished under diplomatic protection and therefore immunity from arrest. But Mr. Assange's lawyer has denied claims he upset his hosts by...
God bless him for trying. No, it took me a while to learn how to skateboard. So you're modding on Convo, and it's a shit show. Mr. Wilson, right? Yeah, it can get a little crazy in that chat. So I don't envy you in that regard, Karen, but
amongst other things, spreading feces on the walls.
It's a difficult situation. I've been visiting him in the embassy throughout this 7-year period. He hasn't had access to the outside. He's been inside a room, effectively, as you said, for more than 7 years. People have children who are 6 and 7 years old for your child's entire life. This man has been inside a room in quite difficult circumstances. Now, the politics of the case with respect to Ecuador changed with the change of government, with Lenin Moreno coming to power. And ever since then, inside the embassy, it's become more and more difficult, to the point where even Human Rights Watch said it was akin to solitary confinement.
Ecuador allowed British police to haul away Julian Assange on Thursday. He maintains he stayed not to avoid rape allegations in Sweden, but because he feared extradition to America.
Oh, like the Convo couch, like Mikasa Sukasa. Nice. Oh, you got clout, Karen. I don't know, maybe I'll check that out in a little bit. I didn't know they were live. I didn't get any notifications.
For exposing US government secrets.
The Swedish prosecutors came inside the Ecuadorian embassy to ask him questions about the case. He gave his testimony, and after that they chose to close the investigation.
3 days after his arrest, and the Ecuador embassy is now devoid of Assange supporters. But his critics say no charges in Sweden doesn't amount to exoneration.
My understanding is that the only reason the Swedish authorities have not prosecuted the case is simply because they couldn't get him into a Swedish court. It isn't because they were satisfied that there was no evidence against him or there was no case to answer. On the contrary.
In fact, in Sweden in 2017, the Director of Public Prosecution, in announcing the rape investigation was being discontinued, suggested Mr. Assange's stay at the embassy was hindering their investigation. She said, "The motive is that there is no reason to believe that the decision to surrender him to Sweden can be executed in the foreseeable future." Now, Mr. Assange's short-term fate is in the hands of Britain's Home Secretary.
So they were at the protest and trolls galore. So was it Pasta and Fiorella? They were at the protest. Were they all the way in was it Seattle or Louisville, Kentucky? That's where Brianna was shot. But I think there was protests going on all over the country. So they could have been anywhere.
If Sweden does press charges as to whether he would be sent there or to America.
Okay, Los Angeles. I think that's where they stay. They do a lot of charity work and stuff too. Combo couch. Spy Pasta and Johnny. Okay. I've never seen Johnny. I know they've mentioned him, or maybe I've seen him and I just forgot. That probably happened too. Maybe he just has one of those forgettable faces. But I know they've mentioned Johnny like all the time on the show. But I think he's like one of those off-camera guys. Like was it Homeboy James from Yellow Brick Road? Like one of those types.
He would base his decision on the seriousness of the allegations, which request was made first, whether or not the person is a fugitive or not, and whether they're simply wanted for trial or whether they're convicted of an offence.
After so long in one room, ultimately Julian Assange probably will end up abroad for judgment to be passed on just how his actions will go down.
Dude, that has to suck, learning how to skateboard in that tiny fucking house or whatever the hell it is, those quarters. That can't be any fun. Like, he's not gonna learn to grind in there. He's not gonna... Maybe he'll learn a kickflip and bunny hop. But, I don't know, man. Not ideal.
In history, Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Sorry you can't hear me. Got secular talk. U.S. sending more troops to Syria. So why am I not surprised? So I don't know. Let's dive into it.
Is increasing our military presence in the Middle East. Yahoo says the following: Pentagon sending troops to Syria after clashes between U.S. and Russian military. The Pentagon is deploying a small number of U.S. troops to Syria after a series of escalating encounters between the U.S. and Russian militaries, according to 3 U.S. defense officials.
Yeah, I know. Me too, Karen. I'm absolutely shocked.
The troops and vehicles will serve as a show of presence to discourage the Russian military from crossing into the eastern security area where U.S. coalition and Syrian Democratic Forces operate, the officials said. The additional troops will include 6 Bradley fighting vehicles and fewer than 100 soldiers operating in northeast Syria on a 90-day deployment. U.S. officials said these actions and reinforcements are a clear sign to Russia to adhere to mutual de-confliction processes and for Russia and other parties to avoid unprofessional, unsafe, and provocative actions in northeast Syria.
So that's fucking rich. These actions and reinforcements are a clear signal to Russia to adhere to mutual deconfliction, there we go, processes, and for Russia and other parties to avoid unprofessional, unsafe, and provocative actions in northeast Syria. So that's fucking rich. That I think the Russians are the only ones that, were invited to be there, that Syria actually wants in their country. So I think it's a little more provocative for a totally uninvited and hostile country to try and occupy the other country and steal all their fucking oil. Seems a little bit more provocative to me. But, I'm not NBC News, or what is this, Yahoo? They're probably conglomerates at this point.
So, again, the headline is, Pentagon sending troops to Syria after clashes between U.S. and Russian military. See, now would be a good time to scream at the hawkish Republican president to de-escalate. Now would be a good time to talk about pulling the troops out. Now would be a good time to talk about avoiding fighting at all costs with another nuclear-armed power. But none of the Democrats are going to say that. You want to know why? Because flies in the narrative of Trump being Putin's puppet. So they're going to ignore the fact that we're escalating with Russia right now. Because that doesn't suit the narrative. The narrative is, he's Vladimir Putin's puppet, he does whatever he wants. That's fundamentally untrue, total BS. But this is what the Democrats believe.
I hate this fucking Russia bullshit so much. Like, not the country. I've never been there, so I'm indifferent to the country. Just, there's all the propaganda around this McCarthyism and all this Russia smearing. It's driving me crazy. Ever since Trump got elected, I feel like I'm going insane. I don't have any more to say. It's breaking me down. It's wearing me down that people actually buy this shit. Usually older people, but sometimes younger people.
So now there's no opposition. Trump can be as hawkish as he wants against Russia, and there's no opposition where they say, hey, maybe you should make peace with Russia. There's no opposition. See, this is a problem. This is a very big problem. But beyond that, now they say, oh, we're adding, fewer than 100 soldiers to the area. I think there's already 500 there. So yet again, we could be seeing the beginning of what's called mission creep. This happens in Iraq. This happens in Afghanistan. This happens all throughout the Middle East. We'll send some, and then you send a little more, and a little more, and a little more. Next thing you know, you got thousands there. And Trump's yo-yoing the troop levels in Iraq and Afghanistan now, dropping it from, whatever it is, 8,000 to 4,000 thereabouts. So what's crazy to me is that the military-industrial complex has such a hold on the two parties that nobody's out there arguing, hey, let's just pull out. Let's just get out of the Middle East. Nobody's arguing that. And that's a shame. A lot of people have died because no politician is really taking a stand for non-intervention and peace.
Yeah, it's a little worse than a shame. I don't even think damn shame would cover it. It's a fucking tragedy. Now you have the main two parties in our country are just so war crazy, and just so bullet happy, and have no value for human life. Unless you're a Republican, then you value, human embryos and human fetuses. But as soon as they're born, it's like, fuck them. So, just fuck both sides.
And now we're seeing a very dangerous escalation because there have been skirmishes between U.S. troops and Russian troops, and sending more U.S. troops there is only going to increase the likelihood. And by the way, let's remember, Trump even admitted, we're in Syria to take the oil. So all this risking escalation with another nuclear armed power to take more oil from the Middle East. This is what Trump said. It's not me coming up with it. He said it. That's why we're in Syria, to take the oil.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think Bashar al-Assad kind of prefers Trump to presidents like Obama. And he actually said this once. I can't quote him verbatim, but he said he did prefer that Trump was just actually honest with all the horrible plans he had for Syria, unlike Obama, kind of beat around the bush and just ended up, invading after the so-called chemical attacks anyway. So, now I'm not excusing Trump, but at least the fucker's honest. Sometimes he's not honest generally, but he has lapses. Let's just call them lapses.
So we're violating international law. We're the bad guys in that situation. Again, nobody really talks about this stuff. I've only seen a handful of articles on it, and mainstream media outlets didn't really cover it too much. Again, should be a big story, but the things that should be never are, because our national attention span is abysmal, and the people who give us the information are mostly propagandists. So the U.S.
So yeah, let's give it up for the president of peace, Donald Trump. Gonna end all the wars. Gonna bring all our troops home, just like he said in his campaign promises. Any day now.
Segment. A man is.
So I don't know. I was thinking about ragging on Tim Pool for a little bit, because he's got some really fucked up opinion about this whole Breonna Taylor thing, and I'm just dying to dive in. I haven't really seen this whole video yet, but I thought it could be fun. So let's see what old Pooley has to say about this shit. I'm gonna skip a little bit in. Let me see. Alright, we'll go right here.
In a tracking poll on sentiment and support for Black Lives Matter, we see that following the killing of Breonna Taylor, support for Black Lives Matter actually went down a little bit. And I'm not entirely sure why, but it could be related to the fact that even CNN's investigation found that this was not murder and charges would not be justified.
Look, just because people are, redacting or casting their support for Black Lives Matter, that doesn't really have a lot to do with like police reform. Black Lives Matter is just like a political group. They're one of many political groups, and one of their objectives is police reform. So just because people are backing out of their support for BLM doesn't mean that they're all automatically now on the side of the cops now. It's not what that means. It just means Black Lives Matter isn't coming across so great to some people, as not as great as it was before. So I don't know. I thought that, I felt like I should clear that up because I know Tim won't.
And anybody who was paying attention would have known this for months. Full disclosure, I made a mistake last night on my IRL podcast by not getting the details correct. See, even I made the mistake. Because the messaging and propaganda from the activists is powerful. I'm worried. I think by the time you watch this, we may be in the midst of massive, widespread riots, maybe across the country, maybe just in Louisville, Kentucky. But I certainly hope people stay safe.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there have been more deaths by police officers on the populace than there have been in these damn riots, okay? I don't know. Maybe I should see the statistics to verify it, but I mean, I doubt, as dangerous as the riots are, I don't think people are just dropping, by the hundreds or anything.
Louisville has already declared a state of emergency. Buildings have already been boarded up. Courthouse.
Not that excuses the riots, because I know I have to add that part. These right wingers, they get all uppity, like, so you're excusing destruction of property, and you're against civil law and all that bullshit. I'm like, I don't know. Those things are great. They're not the end all be all of everything. I think just preserving human lives, having common sense laws, I think those things take precedence over property protection and shit, but I don't know. Different priorities.
Houses, police departments, and warnings have gone out repeatedly. You won't be able to park downtown, and I've said repeatedly, you need to get out of the city before it's too late. I don't know how widespread the riots will be. I'm sure many people think they can stay home and defend themselves. We've already seen what happened to the McCloskeys. We've already seen what happened to Jake Gardner in Omaha, and now this man in Milwaukee. If they find their way to your neighborhood, you will not be legally protected if you try to defend yourself. Which brings us to a very difficult question. Should you stand your ground or should you flee? It's entirely up to you. Don't take my word for it.
So I don't know, correct me wrong. So this guy thinks just like wherever you are, you're not going to be safe. Even if you're in your home, the rioters are coming for you. They're searching. They're just looking for trouble. And I guess there's a law that even if you try to defend yourself, you can't do it. You're just going to get arrested. Like, none of that made any sense from start to finish. For one, I don't think these rioters are like prowling for homes to invade. And even if they were, you would be well within your rights to defend it. Legally, morally, and just, across the spectrum. So I'm not really sure what the fuck Tim is trying to fearmonger over right now.
I'm just trying to make sure you stay safe and you're aware of the risks, but it's entirely upon you to do what you think is right. Just please, everyone, stop the violence. Please.
Yeah, that's what the protests are about, stopping the violence. So, I mean, you get that much, but just no self-awareness on your side, I guess.
But it's only...
not to say that, there isn't violence coming from both ends. I get that, but... if people could have a little more self-awareness, I think maybe this whole thing would be over and done with. But there's no self-awareness, no self-reflection, no change wanted by any side. So here we are.
Only going to create another cycle of revenge. People will be hurt by the riots, their businesses will be destroyed, and they'll call for more police action and more funding, and they'll target the protesters, and they'll be angrier, they'll come out to rally, and the violence will persist until we decide it must stop. But let's not waste any words.
Okay, so that's his theory. He thinks in order to stop the violence, all the people who are anti-Black Lives Matter or pro-cop or whatever he thinks his side is, they just have to just put their foot down and go, enough is enough. We're just going to stop these rioters in their tracks. Like, I don't even know how many people like that there are in the country. But, yeah, I don't think it's that many people who are just like, oh, man, these fucking rioters. Like, I could think he's blowing this thing a little bit out of proportion. I don't know. Maybe I'm not close enough to the riots and shit, even though I don't know. I feel like he's blowing this shit out of proportion. I feel like a fucking I don't know.
Words. Let me show you the breaking news from Courier Journal. Before we get started, however, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work.
That was cracking propaganda. Let's get Tim Flash plugging his shit. See, you're driving from BC to Alberta. Oh yeah, enjoy drive, man.
The activist narrative. I have chosen CNN on purpose because it's considered to be a very credible source by the left. And the right doesn't seem to think CNN's, well, the right, in my opinion, rightly believes CNN's not credible. But in this instance, what CNN is reporting, and they
Oops. I don't know if you heard any of that. But Karen, if you're asking who this guy is, it's Tim Pool. He's just a successful Dave Rubin. If Dave Rubin was bald and, kind of nerdy, I guess.
They reported this months ago, seems to line up with the documents, the data, and witness statements. You can't deny the truth. The activists want to make this about evil cops targeting minorities. That is not the case here. CNN says the activists got it wrong, and thus these officers will not be charged.
Hey, do you guys hear that? Tim Pool says that CNN says the activists got it wrong. So now he's deferring to CNN, which is weird for Tim Pool. I don't think he usually does that. I think he has other sources he usually defers to first, but I guess that's a convenient little point for him to make. Which I don't think the activists got anything wrong. I think the only details that I've heard that have conflicted were that Breonna Taylor might not have been in her bed. Other than that, I don't think any other details have been shown to be wrong. Other than that, they said it was a knock warrant instead of a no-knock warrant. I've been searching the internet for that. Every article I come across says it was a no-knock warrant. I haven't heard anything like that. But this case is real weird because just the details just keep... I wouldn't say that they keep changing. There's just so much discrepancies. So I would have to actually look up some documents on the trial to get to the fucking truth.
Charged in the death of Breonna Taylor. From the Courier Journal, Louisville grand jury indicts one of 3 officers in fatal Breonna Taylor police shooting. They say, a Jefferson County grand jury has indicted one of the 3 Louisville officers in the March 13th fatal police shooting of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor. It was announced Wednesday. Former Detective Brett Hankison was indicted on 3 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment. Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly was not indicted. Detective Miles Cosgrove was not indicted. A wanton endangerment charge is a Class D felony and carries a penalty of 1 to 5 years in prison. The charges read by Judge Annie O'Connell on Wednesday said that Hankison wantonly shot a gun into adjoining apartment 3. The occupants of that apartment were identified by initials. None of them was BT, Breonna Taylor. That means the grand jury did not find that Hankison wantonly fired into Taylor's apartment the night she died, or that the officers are criminally liable in her.
Okay, well, somebody fired in her home. Okay, she didn't shoot herself. So someone should be, I don't know, going to jail. At least going to prison, at the very least, for this shit. If I had done this, I'd be going to jail. But the police, that's kind of what the whole protests are about, Tim. They seem to be above the law. And yeah, people are tired of that shit. Real tired. So I don't know what you want them to do, Tim. Send a letter to their congressman. They've done that. Peacefully protest, they've done that. They violently protested. Nothing seems to be working. So at this point, they're probably going to keep violently protesting until the sides come to a consensus on something. Because at this point, I feel like the state's not even meeting us halfway on these issues. They're just stubbornly trying to keep the status quo going. So I don't know. At this rate, these riots or protests, whatever the fuck you want to call them, they go on forever. And it's pointless to point the blame at either side. Even though, I definitely have my inclinations on which side I think is a little more to blame here, but I don't know. We got to rethink this whole thing, both sides.
Her death in May.
Richard, what up, Anthony? He said Richard Medhurst. Yeah, I heard he's doing a little Assange stream too. We could check that out. I think in the thumbnail it had something to do with Assange having Asperger's, so that could be interesting.
Taylor's neighbor, Chessie Napper, filed a lawsuit against the LMPD officers, claiming that the officers' shots were blindly fired and nearly struck a man inside. Napper was pregnant and had a child in her home, according to the lawsuit. The judge set a $15,000 cash bond for Hankison. A warrant has been issued for his arrest. Cameron said the grand jury decided homicide charges are not applicable because the investigation showed that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in returning deadly fire after they were fired upon by Kenneth Walker, Taylor's boyfriend. CNN confirms this man, Kenneth Walker, fired first, shooting the officer.
There we go again, deferring to CNN when it's convenient. Just so bizarre.
The officers then returned fire. Now, you can argue that this one officer was justified in shooting, but blindly and wantonly? Perhaps not. And for this, he's being charged. Several activists have pointed out that this charge doesn't even necessitate prison time. In fact, he might just get probation, a slap on the wrist, a suspended sentence. Who knows?
Like, imagine the roles were reversed, right? Like, there's some guy, let's say there's some dude, right? And he hears that, like, a cop is going around maybe, like, molesting kids or something. So he decides to take the law into his own hands. And he finds the patrol car that the cop's, taking a break on. And he shoots it up, right? He starts to shoot it up. And the cop, has just enough wherewithal to return fire. And the guy's like, whoa, this cop's returning fire. So, he gets a little more accurate with his shots and lays the man out. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's not a good analogy. But if you reverse the roles here, I'm not explaining this well at all. I don't think a black man would get away with shooting a cop just because the cop shot first. That's what I'm trying to say. I butchered that metaphor, but I don't know. Maybe you guys get it.
It is not a very serious charge, though it is a felony. Quote, justice is not often easy and does not fit the mold of public opinion, and it does not conform to shifting standards, Cameron said. I know that not everyone will be satisfied with the charges we've reported today. My team set out to investigate the circumstances surrounding Miss Taylor's death. We did it with a singular goal in mind, pursuing the truth. Kentucky deserves no less. The city of Louisville deserves no less. If we simply act on emotion or outrage, there is no justice. Mob justice is not justice. I have to say, based upon my readings of what was going on, and I will also add there are some leaked documents I'm not going to get into. It's a bit into the nitty gritty. And so for that, I apologize. But on the surface, from what we can see from all of these stories, these officers, they aside from the wanton endangerment, which may be warranted, and that's a charge, not a conviction. It seems like these officers did not commit a crime. I'm sorry, it's just not the case. If you'd like to change the system, I'm welcome to hear it, and we can figure out what needs to be done. But based upon what the AG is saying, based upon what CNN, of all places, is reporting, these officers knocked repeatedly. They announced themselves. When no one answered, they used a battering ram to break the door down and were immediately fired upon, with one officer being hit in the thigh. This wasn't something I don't know what you could change in this circumstance.
Yeah, so I don't know if the information he's spitting right now is what's really going on. But yeah, with Breonna Taylor's case, it seems like the details are just constantly changing and shit and just contradicting the initial narrative. So, we might never know what really happened, even though something definitely did happen. But one thing I do know is if those cops had never shown up to Breonna Taylor's house to, I don't know, fight their little drug war or whatever the fuck, Breonna Taylor would still be alive. And I think it's unacceptable she's dead. It should be unacceptable to Tim.
What should the cops have done differently? Maybe just kept knocking? We'll know.
Or maybe they could have fucked off and not shown up. Or they just could have, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot they could have done differently, dude. It's like, where do I start? They could have not just shot like blindly into a fucking house. They could have, I don't know, identified who was in the house, that actually done anything. They could have gotten the right house, which I'm not convinced that they did. I think there's a lot of evidence they got the wrong one. And after the fact, just tried to, dig up as much dirt on Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend as they could to clean their tracks. So, I don't know, there's nothing, this whole case, this whole event kind of stinks to high hell.
Oh, they have to serve a warrant. So they break the door down and they got shot and they returned fire. These things sometimes happen. It's tragic, but I don't know what you think should change about this.
Yo, Tim doesn't know what we should change. I'm betting that Tim Pool isn't in favor of ending the drug war. I don't know, just a sinking suspicion that he's just not in favor of it. Because that's one of billions of things we can do to change it. But I want to move on to another thing. There's another video here which kind of relates to this. And that's where Tim Pool gets his sources. Ayo. Yeah, that's right. Rational National did a video called Tim Pool's Grift Exposed by Source Analysis. So, as you can see here, CNN, Tim Pool only trusts CNN a little bit more than The Hill, which makes no sense to me. But even after CNN, Tim Pool trusts sources like Breitbart News more than The Hill and the Washington Post and CNN. That Ben Shapiro, what's that, the Daily Wire? I think Ben Shapiro works for the Daily Wire. New York Times, Fox News. But his all-time favorite's the Daily Mail. So this is where Tim Pool gets his sources, just so you guys know. This is where he got all the facts about the Breonna Taylor cases, from jack-offs like Fox News and the Daily Mail. So just try to keep that in mind, all you Tim Pool fanboys out there. I know none of you are watching this video right now, but if you ever come across it, just try to keep that in mind before taking Tim Pool too fucking seriously. We can watch a little bit Rational National. I don't want to just jack his little chart here, even though it's not. He didn't make this chart. Some other dude posted on Twitter, and he just did a vid on it. Oops.
New York Times. Left. They consider New York Times to be a left-wing source.
Oh, man. I wouldn't say he's as dumb as Tim, but Rational National, he can be a little too SJW for my taste, but the guy's okay. He ain't my first go-to source for fucking news. He's just like whatever. He's like a 5 out of 10 for me. And to put that in perspective, Tim Pool would be like a 1. So there you go.
Now you could say maybe culturally, maybe pro-choice, does not agree with white nationalists. So maybe in that sense, left bias. But in terms of economic policy, and in terms of, say, the Democratic...
Like, isn't it so tragic that The Hill is the only, gray, I guess we call it gray little box on the screen? All these other huge news outlets, that supposedly have this big-ass boner for truth and getting to the bottom of things and facts. They all have these outright biases that are clear to everyone. And the only one out of all these fucking news channels that you can't really peg into a box, or that you can at least say is the least biased of all of them, is The Hill. Which I'm sure you guys, have different problems with The Hill, but you can't deny, compared to all these other losers on the screen, The Hill's, they've got something going on. Oh, propaganda is using voice command to chat right now. Fancy you. How do you like living in the year 2020, prop? Is it comfy enough? Yeah?
Primary. Not a left-wing bias. Anyone that followed that primary at all understands. New York Times, Washington Post, mainstream media, CNN, another one here. Here's Washington Post, Newsweek. Newsweek's kind of back and forth. But Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, not big fans of Bernie Sanders. Not big fans of the working class. There is the occasional story that is an investigative piece that dives into aspects, say the eviction crisis and stuff like that. But when it comes to political,
I don't know. I'd say the main difference, Anthony, between Rational National and Tim is I don't see Rational National as a huckster, as like a con man and grifter just trying to come up on as much money as he can before he dies. That's how I look at Tim Pool. I don't even know if he really cares that much about the shit he talks about. I think Tim Pool cares about how many people are watching. And I think Rational National, to an extent, sure, like the same could be said about him, but I don't think you could compare him to Tim Pool. He's not grifting on the same level as Tim Pool, bro. He comes across a little more genuine to me, like he actually cares about this shit. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just being deceived. Let me see. Unrest, blah, blah. Shit. I had some more videos lined up. But
analysis. Not at all left-wing bias. But that's what apparently Tim Pool has used here, and it's considered to be left-wing. But here you have Andy No. Right-wing provocateur here, Andy No, as one of the major sources for Tim Pool.
That's some dude named Andy No. I don't know him. I guess he's some right-wing dude.
New York Post, the Oregonian, Breitbart. So others.
Okay, and the Oregonian. I couldn't even read that because it was in like this like fancy ass font.
Sources here. But again, this is somebody who pretends to be, I'm a disillusioned Democratic Party supporter. The left's gone crazy. Let me now only source right-wing sources while discussing how crazy the left are. Like this, and it is an amazing grift. Tim Pool, every single one of his videos, it hitting 1 million or almost 1 million. It is crazy. Absolutely crazy the amount of views that man gets. There is so much money to be made on YouTube if you are a right-wing grifter. And Tim Pool is the perfect example of that.
Yeah, it seems that way. I don't know what it is. I have some theories. So I think most people on the right, these are the people that tend to have money. Okay, that's why they can't really relate to the problems of poor people, proletariats, like the working class. They can relate maybe a little bit, but not enough that and then we start talking about socialist programs and shit that they're not just gonna immediately turn off and be like, socialism, that destroyed Russia, or we're not Chinese, that shit. So I think it's just being on the right. I think it's just a luxury, is what I'm getting at. Like I've never met anyone who was just like rock bottom, like unemployed, just the world was just shitting on them every day, and they needed all this help, and they were just still just right wing, in their heart of hearts they believed in just picking themselves up by their bootstraps, and I feel like people on the right just kind of naive to a lot of the pain that most people kind of feel, and it's due to a lot of shit. But yeah, as to how the right wingers get rich doing YouTube, yeah, it's just they're placating to the audience with the most cash. They're telling people what they want to hear, and those people respond with money and shit. Donating, Patreon, whatever, super chats. So that's my theory. Yeah, but basically, Anthony, we live in a right-wing country. I think it's slowly starting to change. I'm noticing a very slight. I'm noticing a little bit of a paradigm shift, but yeah, this country is mostly, it's obviously just right-wing. So placating to them, placating the capitalists, that's obviously the surefire way to earn capital.
On here, across 330 plus videos analyzed, Tim Pool's 5 most used sources are, from most used to least, Daily Mail, Fox News, New York Times, Andy No tweets. This still cracks me up. New York Post. I think one more tweet here. When Tim Pool does include sources with a pro-left bias, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. Apparently.
All right, guys, I'm gonna put on a Tulsi Gabbard video. I don't know if you can stomach it
for perceived failings or bias.
Tulsi left
rarely, if ever, doing.
I know Tulsi left a raw taste in a lot of our mouths, but fuck it. Let's see what the old girl has to say today. This one's called "Our Country Needs Us."
Our country needs us.
Our country needs us. I just had to say that one more time.
Those who have the privilege of holding public office must have certain qualities. Chief among them is a commitment to serve, to put the well-being of people and our planet ahead of political interests, and to treat others with respect. But unfortunately, there are too few people in positions of power who actually embody these qualities. As we see millions of people all across the country who are suffering, those in power are using that power to sow the seeds of divisiveness for their own personal or political benefit. We need leaders who are willing to stand up and face these unprecedented times with courage and with strength and aloha. Leaders who actually embody the principles of service above self. That's why I've started a new organization, Tulsi Aloha, so that our mission will continue by raising awareness around the important challenges that we face and supporting leaders who embody the spirit of aloha, putting service above self. Leaders who are committed to upholding our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms, protecting our civil liberties, our environment, and ending regime change wars, this new Cold War and nuclear arms race. But we can't do this without you. It's going to take all of us coming together in the spirit of service to our country and to one another. I know that when we stand united, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. So I hope you'll join me.
So she didn't really have much to say. I guess she's starting some organization that no one's probably going to care about. And yeah. Looks cute though. Well, not in this frame because I paused it weird, but she looks healthy, Looks like looks like she's been doing pretty good. So Anthony, he said, bruh, the media is right wing, and that ain't changing a thing. If Silicon Valley runs most of it in their neoliberalism, it's just another variation of right wing BS, but with fake woke energy. Yeah, it feels that way. Like the neoliberalism. Yeah, it's all like fake woke shit. Like, I don't know. Like, they can't be against substantive policies that the right has. Like, they can't be against ending, they can't be for ending the wars because they're probably getting paid by the same, weapons contractors and military contractors that the right wings and Republican folks are. So just in a general sense, they try to keep the conversation just narrowed to, just petty, just cultural issues and shit. When really the solutions are probably a little bit deeper than that. I don't know. Let's see what's going on Redacted. Mind blowing.
On September 14th, 60 years ago in the nation of Congo, a team of operatives backed by the CIA and MI6 discovered the ruins of a lost city deep in the Congolese jungle. Wait. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, that's the movie Congo. Sorry. The Republic of Congo is where the CIA helped overthrow.
Oh, dude, you know I missed that movie. I heard it was good. Have you guys seen Congo? Should I watch that shit?
A democratically elected government in 1960. There we go. That's much more of a CIA thing to do. I mean, if they were out there uncovering mystical ancient cities, it'd probably be a much better use of taxpayer dollars. That year, 17 African nations, including what became the Republic of Congo, declared independence from their colonizers in what was soon known as the Year of Africa. The star of this Pan-African independence struggle was Congo's own Patrice Lumumba. Prior to being called the Republic of Congo, the nation was known as the Belgian Congo, and it wasn't just named that as a tribute to Belgium. The people of Central Africa didn't just wake up one day and become enamored with a tiny European country thousands of miles away where people eat fries with mayo. Belgium got involved
Okay, that was disgusting.
in the 1880s when King Leopold II smushed a bunch of territory together and established the Congo Free State. Free, as in for King Leopold to plunder. After a few years, the Congo became an official colony, and the Belgians began a long-standing colonial relationship with the United States, which was eager to take advantage of the enormous natural wealth of the Congo, continuing its use of the uranium from Congolese mines to manufacture the first atomic weapons, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Now, that's a win-win-win situation. The Belgians get access to mineral riches they can use to make their tacky-ass waffle jewelry. The U.S. gets the materials we need to make bombs, and we love bombs. And the Congolese, they get to not have to worry about running a government and all that boring stuff. They're free from it. Free from freedom, if you will. Now, while that may sound appealing to some Americans, the Congolese were less than grateful. After years of unrest and Congolese nationalist movements, the Belgians finally relented and agreed to give the Congo back to the Congo. That's where Patrice Lumumba comes in. After being elected prime minister in 1960, Lumumba gave a rousing speech in Belgium, right in front of his soon-to-be former colonizers, where he condemned their oppressive legacy and announced that the Republic of Congo was to nationalize its natural resources. Lumumba's Independence Day speech was a big hit back home, but all over the newly post-imperial world, leaders were freaking out. We just gave you your own government. You're not supposed to take back your own land with it. Rich people need that land to mine diamonds for their marriage proposals and to make electronics to sustain those marriages. Lumumba had barely been in office a week when the heavily white Belgian Katanga region, that's Topanga. I said Katanga.
Really? Topanga?
There we go. Okay. The Belgians assisted a clandestine group in the Katanga region's attempt to secede from the Republic of Congo. With his nation-state newly minted, Lumumba sought help from the UN, who offered to write up a sternly worded complaint, but couldn't do much beyond that. He also went to the US, who had some experience with putting down insurrections, especially ones led by white supremacists. But Uncle Sam said no way. Lumumba was left with no choice but to go to the Soviet Union, thrusting Congo into the Cold War. Meanwhile, his enemies in industry and intelligence agencies had found a willing accomplice in Lumumba's comrade, former journalist and now head of the army, Joseph Mobutu. Together, they worked to foment rebellion in the army, stoke unrest, exploit attacks on whites, and create an economic crisis.
Yeah, Karen, I think this dude, he's been on Redacted tonight a few times. I can just tell he's an RT correspondent now, but I think I've seen him on Lee Camp show. Didn't know he wore earrings, but whatever. That's his style.
Serving just 2.5 months as prime minister, Patrice Lumumba was removed from office by Mobutu's troops on September 14, 1960. In January of 1961, he was executed. Lumumba was in power for a very short period of time. He didn't get a chance to accomplish even a fraction of all the things he set out to do. But he did manage to train a brilliant operative who went to the U.S. and cultivated some of the most effective criticism of America's racial caste system. That's right, the mother of Dave Chappelle.
This man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that?
He also inspired millions to keep up his fight, to snuff out colonialism wherever it lurks. From jackbooted soldiers knocking down doors in the Middle East to boardrooms of bureaucrats relegating children to starvation with the flick of a pen. To take on these forces and fight for a better world in any way you can on whatever ground you stand. For Mind-Blowing Old News, I'm Anders Lee with Redacted Tonight.
Well, that was cool. Learned a little bit about Lumumba and the Congolese. So let me see. If you guys want to drop links at this point, I'll go ahead and play some videos. If you have any Assange shit in particular, I'd love to watch some videos on Julian Assange and learn a little bit more about what's going on with his case. But in the meantime, I'll kick you guys a private video that I made. It's like a demo or a pilot, I guess, for this comic I'm working on, Quincy and the Dames. I showed Karen a little bit of it. She liked it. I actually remastered it to make it look a little bit better. So hold on. That's not it. You gotta go to my videos. Oh, here you go. So this is actually set to private. Yeah, go ahead and drop a link, Anthony. Propaganda, Karen, if you have any cool Assange videos you want to watch, and I'll read Propaganda's little thing that he sent. Oops. Goddamn, it's pretty long. See, so Prop goes, yo, with the whole Epstein connection and Bill Clinton and Hillary and Trump and everything, it really makes me think that the DNC and RNC are one party and that they have a secret backdoor meetings. Yeah, definitely, Prop. It's not beyond, it's not impossible. Pretty easy to imagine that they're just really one party, and that all their differences are just so, just like trite and petty that, they've got to be doing this shit on purpose. Just putting on a show for the masses, like, oh yeah, we're against the Republicans, sure, whatever you want. They're just telling people what they want to hear so they can get votes. You see, and other people that are not famous but wield and control a lot of money and power that we do not know about, the Epstein's bosses and faggot and forget the boss. I'm not sure you're right in there, Prop, to be honest. The bosses of Epstein's bosses and all that stuff. So I guess you're saying that Epstein's bosses are probably the same bosses of, the people in power right now. If that's what you're getting at, then yeah, man, I'm right with you on there. Anyway, watch this real quick, and we'll check out the links. So, hope you guys enjoy it.
Stop! Talk, motherfucker, come on. What's your password, bitch? Hurry up. It's.
Keep it gangsta blood, don't tell that pussy pig shit, nigga.
Viola, shoot that nigga.
Bye, nigga.
Oh, shit. Hold up, I'll tell you. Man, it's Rick Dicker. 2 words, alright? Chunky man, try Rick Dicker, fool.
Got work, I'm in his account.
I don't know what the fuck Rick Dickard is, but it sounds illegal.
Man, you ain't got 2 bites up in this bitch.
Herb, the hell you want, JC?
Hey, fool, it's lunchtime. We rolling that way to scoop y'all up.
Perfect. We finished ganking some frontliners over here. Grub's on us.
Otra vez? I thought we promised Quinn we wasn't gonna kill nobody for a while.
Fuck Quincy, I ain't fist to leave no witnesses.
Bro! I'm sick of taking orders from virgins and dames. I don't see him putting in no work.
Yep, that's the premiere of Quincy and the Dames, the pilot. Me and my buddies were doing the voices on that shit last night. My cousin did a few lines too. And basically, I just need like a few more females to do some more like the girls parts and shit. Like I sent out like a casting call on Craigslist, and I got a bunch of replies back. But I just need like one more character's lines done, and I can pretty much just like voice the whole chapter, so be able to like see the whole chapter voiced out eventually. And I'll eventually take this out of private. But I didn't credit any of the voice actors in the video, so I didn't want to put it on YouTube yet. But yeah, alrighty, let me see. I'm trying to find that link to that you guys sent, but first I gotta open the damn shit. Okay, here we go. But yeah, alright. Okay, so we got Anthony. Did a little something, something. Look at that. Goes this. Oh shit. Shit. Oh, you like that, Anthony? Good. I'm glad you dug it, man. It gets better. That's just the only part I was able to just get enough people to voice some shit on. Whoops. Can you tab? Here we go. That was easy.
Hi, I'm Chris Hedges, and we are here in Salem, Oregon, interviewing Dr. Sheldon Wolin, who taught politics for many years at Berkeley and later Princeton. He is the author of several
Let me see. It's propaganda. You want me to break down how to make the music and everything? I don't know if you were in the stream when I was on Family Tracker, when I was like fucking around making some song. I gotta finish that song, by the way. But I just use that program, Family Tracker, and that's how I make the songs. As far as musical theory, I wouldn't call myself a layman. I know like a lot of the scales and stuff. I don't know the names, but I mean, I don't know. I've been studying music enough that, you know, not to toot my own horn, but, you know, I can make a decent melody. Not sure it's something I'd be able to teach, but it's just, I don't know, just something that I like to do for fun. Let me see. And did we see the information about Bill Clinton and Maxwell meeting in Manhattan for a fancy dinner and all these celebrities being attending? Okay. No, I didn't hear about that. Was that recently, or was did they just dig up that like some photos or something, or did they just find the guest list recently on that? So, no, I didn't hear about it. Very interesting.
seminal works on political philosophy, including Politics and Vision and Democracy Incorporated, and we are going to be asking him today about the state of American democracy, political participation, and what he calls inverted totalitarianism. So let's begin with this concept of inverted totalitarianism, which has antecedents, and in your great work, Politics and Vision, you reach back all the way to the Greeks up through the present age to talk about the evolution of political philosophy. What do you mean by it?
Well, I mean by it that in the inverted idea, it's the idea that democracy has been, in effect, turned upside down. It's supposed to be a government by the people and for the people and all the rest of the sort of rhetoric we're used to. But it's become now so patently an organized form of government dominated by groups which are only vaguely, if at all, responsible or even responsive to popular needs and popular demands. So that, but it, at the same time, it retains a...
Yeah, Epstein's dead, so obviously this didn't happen too super recently. But yeah, the fact that it happened at all, it's pretty interesting. That he met with Clinton. Interesting, but not surprising, if you know Bill Clinton.
Kind of patina of democracy, because we still have elections. They're still relatively free in any conventional sense. We have a relatively free media, but what's missing from it is a kind of crucial, continuous opposition which has a coherent position and is not just saying no, 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 but has got an alternative and above all has got an ongoing critique of what's wrong and what needs to be remedied.
You juxtapose inverted totalitarianism to classical totalitarianism, fascism, communism, and you say that there are very kind of distinct differences between these two types of totalitarianism. What are those differences?
Well, certainly one is in classic totalitarianism, the fundamental principle is the leadership principle and the notion that the masses exist not as a citizenry, but as a means of support which can be rallied and mustered almost at will by the dominant powers. That's the classical. That's the classical one, and the contemporary one is one in which the rule by the people is enshrined as the sort of popular message about what we are, but which is in fact is not really true to the facts of political life in this day and age.
Well, you talk about how in classical totalitarian regimes, politics trumps economics. But in inverted totalitarianism, it's the reverse.
That's right, yeah. In classic totalitarianism, thinking here now about the Nazis and the fascists, and also even about the communists.
That'll definitely give it to them. Like the classical totalitarians, it's like they definitely prioritize their policies and their philosophies and shit over, economics. And that was across the board in communism, fascism, capitalism, whatever. Back then, it was all just policies over economics. For better or for worse, there was just kind of mixed results in each country. But yeah, now it's all about the dollar, which, makes sense. It seems like, we started out with, as tribes and shit, and we had like chiefs looking over the little villages or whatever. Then we, evolved to monarchies, and then, feudalism, mercantilism, and all that shit. And we finally get to, capitalism, democracy. And it just seems like even when people have the best, the best interest of everyone in mind, these institutions seem to have a half-life that doesn't guard against corruption. And just give it enough time, they're going to fall victim to corruption if they're not already corrupt from the beginning. So that's the main problem, I think, with America, is just there weren't enough things in place to prevent all these corrupt assholes from, breaking the rules set in place for a reason. And what we have are we got a country full of crooked cops, where you basically have to conform to that culture, or you're not going to survive in that culture. You're not going to survive being a policeman very long if you're not crooked, and you probably won't survive being a politician very long if you're not crooked and corrupt. And it's like that with a lot of institutions, and that's the thing that has to change. We got to start putting in policies in place that thwart the corruption just at the source before it even begins. Because corruption, it's like a virus; it just spreads. You have one person breaking the rules, getting away with things, coming up. It's not long until another person does the same if he's successful, and the outcome seems optimal or ideal for him. So, eventually everyone in that institution is going to be corrupt. So I think that's the main thing we got to start focusing on, is just how to just stop this fucking corruption.
The economy is viewed as a tool which the powers that be or manipulate and utilize in accordance with what they conceive to be the political.
Yeah, Anthony said the cops are doing as the system wanted them to do, oppress willingly or unwillingly. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. It's the system that pretty much allows them to be as corrupt as they are and get away with it. And I think to a certain extent the system might encourage it, especially when the enforcement of the laws or the locking up of whoever is happens to be in the minority neighborhoods or minority dominated cities and places. Yeah, the system pretty much encourages the corruption at that point. But I think it goes deeper than that too. But I don't know. I can't really articulate well right now. It's just
requirements of ruling, and they will take whatever steps are needed in the economy in order to ensure the long-run sustainability of the political order. In other words, the sort of arrows of political power flow from top to bottom. Now, in inverted totalitarianism, the imagery is that of a populace which is enshrined as the leadership group, but which in fact doesn't rule.
That was funny as hell, Tony. Watchers closely. In your opinion, the only time a cop is crooked is when they go against their superiors and peers. They were created to control people who are considered dissenters. Yeah, it's a cool way of looking at it. The crooked cops are actually the good ones. The good ones are all fucked up. I mean, basically. I didn't want to bring this up, but if you guys watch Breaking Bad, there's a spin-off called Better Call Saul. And there's a character named Mike in it who was in both shows, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And Mike, he used to be a cop. He used to be on the force and shit. And I don't want to ruin the show if you haven't seen it. God damn it! But it's such, I don't know. Spoiler alert. If you want to watch Better Call Saul, you don't want me to spoil it. Just mute it. But in the show, Mike used to be a cop. He had a son who was also on the force, him and his son. And Mike was on the force for a while, so his precinct was very crooked. And he was just as crooked as anyone in his precinct. And I think there's like some gangster that worked out a deal with one of his son's partners. And his son's partner came to his son with some money, saying, hey, I got this from, this gang leader or whatever, protection, some crooked cop gang deal. But here's the thing, Mike's son wasn't crooked, and he didn't want to take the money. So he goes to his father, Mike, and he tells him that, hey, my partner's real crooked, he's working with these gangsters, what should I do? And Mike, he's already been a cop a long time. He knows how the game is played. He had to tell his son, like, hey, I take the money too. I'm just as crooked as all these other cops. And if you don't take this money, your life is actually in danger. These other cops, they're going to think they can't trust you. And, you know, you're not going to be safe after that. So he convinces his son to take the money, you know, after basically revealing that, yeah, I'm just as crooked as them. So in the show, his son ends up, you know, taking the money, being crooked, and his son still ends up getting murdered like 2 days later. And that was like the breaking point for Mike, where he couldn't be a cop anymore. He also goes to get revenge, but yeah. All right, that's the end of the spoilers. I just thought it was a little relevant to the discussion. I love Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, really well written shows.
But which is turned upside down in the sense that the people are enshrined at the top but don't rule, and minority rule is usually treated as something to be abhorred, but is in fact what we have. And it's the problem has to do, I think, with the historical relationship between political orders and economic orders. And democracy, I think, from the beginning, never quite managed to make the kind of case for an economic order that would sustain and help to develop democracy, rather than being.
So rewind what he said. All right, we'll go back.
Hoard, but is in fact what we have. And it's the problem has to do, I think, with the historical relationship between political orders and economic orders. And democracy, I think, from the beginning, never quite managed to make the kind of case for an economic order that would sustain and help to develop democracy, rather than being a kind of constant threat to the egalitarianism and popular rule that democracy stands for.
In your book, Politics and Vision, you quote figures.
So basically saying that our economic system basically isn't set up to sustain like an egalitarian, you know, ideal kind of democracy or government, which, you know, it's obviously not.
There's like Max Weber, who talk about.
Yeah, and I saw El Camino. I liked it, you know, a little bit. I definitely didn't like it as much as Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which I still have to finish. Better Call Saul, I'm like halfway through it or whatever. But yeah, Mike and Saul, awesome characters. I was afraid I wasn't even gonna like the spin-off at first, but I mean, they're such good characters, Mike and Saul, that yeah, they blew it out the park. They're really interesting. They've got really interesting backstories.
About capitalism as, in fact, being a destructive force to democracy.
Well, I think Weber's critique of capitalism.
So he's talking about the illusion they have about voting. We're told it counts, but rarely does. I mean, that's for damn sure. I don't know. Maybe at one point in history, voting mattered, but I don't think it has for a long time. Like, even if the votes count, you know, it's like they don't matter, because it's like you've got douchebags on both ends of the spectrum that govern the country in the same fucking way. So it's like even if voting did matter, it wouldn't matter.
It's even broader. I think he views it as quintessentially destructive, not only of democracy, but also, of course, of the sort of feudal aristocratic system which had preceded it. Capitalism is destructive because it has to eliminate the kind of custom, mores, political values, even institutions that present any kind of credible threat to the autonomy of the economy. And it's that's where the battle lies. The capitalism wants an autonomous economy. They want a political order subservient to the needs of the economy. And their notion of an economy, while it's broadly based in the sense of capitalism in which there can be relatively free entrance and property is relatively widely dispersed, it's also a capitalism which, in the last analysis, is elitist as any aristocratic system ever was.
You talk in the book about how it was.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. It's like democracy was supposed to, be different from all these monarchies and aristocracies, but if you look around, everything's just as aristocratic as it probably was, as it's ever been. You've got rich people doing rich people stuff. You can't relate to poor people. Poor people not really relating so much to the rich people. So, nothing's really changed.
It was essentially the engine of the Cold War, juxtaposing a supposedly socialist Soviet Union, although, like many writers, including Chomsky, I think you would argue that Leninism was not a socialist movement. I think Chomsky actually calls it a kind of counter-revolution. Adam Ulam talks about it as a kind of, Adam Ulam talks about it as a counter-revolution. Chomsky is a right-wing deviation. But nevertheless, that juxtaposition of the Cold War essentially freed corporate capitalism in the name of the struggle against communism to deform American democracy. And just also just want to make it clear that you are very aware in, especially in Politics and Vision, of the hesitancy on the part of our founding fathers to actually permit direct democracy. So we're not in this moment idealizing the system that was put in place. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's true. I think the system that was consciously and deliberately constructed by the founders who framed the Constitution, that democracy was the enemy. And that was rooted in historical realities. Many of the colonial governments had a very strong popular element that became increasingly prominent as the colonies moved towards rebellion. And rebellion meant not only resisting British rule, but also involved the growth of popular institutions and their hegemony in the colonies as well as in the nation as a whole.
So yeah, Anthony makes a good point. Hedges Minter talks about this Bill Gates and Bezos and others have more power than kings. And that China and America both adhere to billionaires, which that's a good point. You got these people like Bezos or whoever, they make all this money, and yeah, they have all this power over all these other countries, and of course their native countries, and no one seems to have a problem with this, oddly enough, especially no one on the right wing. If you ask anyone on the right, it's like, hey, you have a problem that with one man having so much power and influence over the planet? They're like, oh no, he earned that money because he's so smart and just so much better than us. So it's all good. We're in good hands. And that sounds psychotic to me, and I think a lot of you guys. But that's how some people think. They really think that capitalism is just one giant value test, one giant quality test for human beings. And the more money you make, just the better a person you are, and the poorer you are, that's just a testament to how many mistakes you've made. So, it's pretty asinine, but whatever, And to some of their credit, some right wingers, they get it that that people probably shouldn't have this much power, and that just because you're poor doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person, that you fucked up. But those right wingers tend not to give a shit regardless. So I don't know.
So that the So that the original impulses to the Constitution came in large measure from this democratizing movement, but the framers of the Constitution understood very well that this would mean at least would jeopardize the ruling groups that they thought were absolutely necessary to any kind of civilized order. And by ruling groups, they meant not only those who were better educated, but by those who were propertied, because they regarded property as a sign of talent and of ability, so that it wasn't just wealth as such, but rather a constellation of virtues as well as wealth that entitled capitalists to rule. And they felt that this was in the best interest of the country. And you must remember at this time that the people, so-called, were not well educated and in many ways were feeling their way towards defining their own role in a political system. And above all, they were preoccupied, as people always have been, with making a living, with surviving. And those were difficult times, as most times are, so that politics for them could only be an occasional activity, and so that there would always be an uneasy relationship between a democracy that was often quiescent and a form of rule which was constantly trying to reduce as far as possible democratic influence in order to permit those who were qualified to govern the country in the best interest of the country.
And of course, when we talk about property, we must include slaveholders.
Indeed. Although, of course, there was, in the beginning, a tension between the northern colonies and the southern colonies.
This fear of direct democracy is kind of epitomized by Thomas Paine, who was very useful in fomenting.
Yeah, Tony, I gotta agree that in order to be a billionaire, you have to have destroyed thousands of lives and not millions. Like, maybe not necessarily have destroyed thousands of lives, but think about it. To have made $1 billion, there's no way you made that alone. You made that $1 billion by employing, maybe thousands of people. Okay? And I bet the thousands of people we employed, they're probably not billionaires. They're probably not even millionaires. Most of them, maybe some of them are. But what if the guy with the $1 billion decided, hey, you know what? All these people who worked under me and helped me come up, what if I gave them some of my wealth? Maybe if I gave them just a fraction of my billions. And instead of having one billionaire and a handful of thousandaires and just a bunch of poor people, you'd have like a bunch of people with hundreds and thousands of dollars, or maybe just a bunch of millionaires. But you don't get that with billionaires because they're psychotic hoarders. So yeah, you're exactly right, Tony.
Revolutionary consciousness, but essentially turned into a pariah once the revolution was over and the native aristocracy sought to limit the power of participatory democracy.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's too bad Paine didn't have at his disposal Lenin's phrase, permanent revolution, because I think that's what he felt, not in the sense of violence, but in the sense of a kind of conscious participatory element that was very strong, that would have to be continuous, and that it couldn't just be episodic. So that there was always a tension between what he thought to be democratic vitality.
Thomas Paine is one of my favorite founding fathers, by the way. He was the only, he was probably the most secular of all the founding fathers. The rest of them were they're all like Christians or whatever. But Thomas Paine, he was ahead of his time. He kind of saw past the bullshit. And I think what they're saying right now is, we come from a country, this country was founded on, not just genocide, of course, and all that, slavery, all that bad shit, but also rebellion. There's that part. And there's a section of this country that just has no rebellion in them. They have nothing but just the utmost deference to whatever authority you lay before them. Just as long as that authority figure says all the right magic words, all the right buzzwords like God bless America or trans rights, whatever that shit is, you know, these people, they'll do whatever the authority figure says. So it's kind of like a 360-degree turn from what the founding fathers kind of had in mind. They built the country based on freedom and rebellion and, you know, power to the people. And what we have now is just a bunch of conformists bowing to the state and taking their word for it.
And the sort of ordered, structured, election-related, term-related kind of political system that the framers had in mind.
So let's look at the Cold War, because in Politics and Vision, as in Democracy Incorporated, you talk about the framing of what Dwight McDonald will call the psychosis of permanent war, this constant battle against communism, as giving capital the tools by which they could destroy those democratic institutions, traditions, and values that were in place. How did that happen? What was the process?
Well, I think it happened because of the way that the Cold War was framed. That is, it was framed as not only a war between communism and capitalism, but also a war of which the subtext was that communism was, after all, an ideology that favored ordinary people. Now, it got perverted, there's no question about that, by Lenin and by Stalin, and into something very, very different.
Definitely. I think communism got way perverted by Lenin and Stalin, and by Mao, by Pol Pot, whatever. But they didn't do it alone. The entire time they were trying to run their little communist country, they were in a Cold War against the United States, one of the most powerful countries in the world at the time after World War II. So you've got the United States, you know, fucking with the worldwide trade, the global trade of these countries, sometimes sanctioning them heavily in cases of like Cuba and shit, and China usually. And, you know, the bullshit with Russia is going on to this day for some reason. But, and yeah, these things affect the outcome of communism. And it wasn't just like incidental sanctions and shit, bro. Like the United States was going out of its way, hiring CIA operatives to gather intel on these countries and bring them down from the inside with all these coups and shit. And this is what people never talk about when they spat about how communism and socialism never fucking work. You know, it's not an honest conversation.
But in the Cold War, I think what was lost in the struggle was the ability to see that there was some kind of justification in historical reality for the appearance of communism, that it wasn't just a freak, and it wasn't just a kind of mindless dictatorship, but that the plight of ordinary people under the forms of economic organization that had become prominent, the plight of the common people had become desperate. There was no social security, there were no wage guarantees, there was no union organization.
Just like today.
Yeah, they were powerless. And the ruling groups, the capitalist groups, were very conscious of what they had and what was needed to keep it going. And that's why figures like Alexander Hamilton are so important, because they understood this. They understood it from the beginning, that what capitalism required in the way not only of so-called free enterprise, but remember, Hamilton believed very, very strongly in the kind of camaraderie between capitalism and strong central government. that a strong central government was not the enemy of capitalism, but rather its tool, and that what had to be constantly kind of revitalized was that kind of relationship, because it was always being threatened by populist democracy, which wanted to break that link and cause government to be return to some kind of responsive relationship to the people.
And the Cold War. So the Cold War arises, and this becomes the kind of moment by which capital, and especially corporate capital, can dismantle the New Deal and free itself from any kind of regulation and constraint to deform and destroy American democracy. Can you talk about that process, what happened during that period?
Well, I think the first thing to be said about it is the success with which the governing groups managed to create a Cold War that was really so total in its spread that it was hard to mount a critical opposition or to take a more detached view of our relationship to the Soviet Union and just what kind of problem it created. And it also had the effect, of course, of skewing the way we looked at domestic discontents, domestic inequalities, and so on, because it was always easy to tar them with the brush of communism.
Yep. It's like deja freaking vu. You know, any dissenters in your country that don't like the way things are being run, just call them a commie and move on. Keep it trucking.
So that the communism was just more than a regime. It was also a kind of total depiction of what was the threat to and a complete opposite to our own form of society, our own form of economy and government.
And in Politics and Vision, you talk about, because of that ideological clash, therefore, any restriction of capitalism, which was defined in opposition to communism as a kind of democratic good, if you want to use that word, was lifted in the name of the battle against communism, that it became capitalism that was juxtaposed to communism rather than democracy. And therefore, this empowered capital in a very pernicious way to dismantle democratic institutions in the name of the war on communism.
Oh, I think there's no question about that. The notion that you first had to, so to speak, unleash the great potential capitalism had for improving everybody's economic lot, and the kind of constraints that had been developed not only by the New Deal, but by progressive movements throughout the 19th century and early 20th century in the United States, where it had been increasingly understood that while American economic institutions were a good thing, so to speak, and needed to be nurtured and developed, they also posed a threat. They posed a threat because they tended to result in concentrations of power, concentrations of economic power that quickly translated themselves into political influence because of the inevitably porous nature of democratic representation in elections and rule.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when I was referring to like the half-life on democracy, because when you have these institutions and systems where the outcome's always going to be the same, you know, a handful of people are going to be disproportionate and wildly more successful than pretty much everyone else. You know, it's just a recipe for just nonstop, rampant corruption, just abject corruption. And unless you have something in place to prevent it, then it's just going to keep on happening.
So that the difficulty's been there for a long time, been recognized for a long time, but we go through these periods of sleepwalking where we have to relearn lessons that have been known almost since the birth of the Republic, or at least since the birth of Jeffersonian democracy, that capitalism has its virtues, but it has to be carefully watched, observed, and often controlled.
Thank you. Please join us for part 2.
Yeah, that video kicked ass. Was that Chris Hedges? Yeah, we saw some Chris Hedges videos a few streams ago. He's a cool guy. All right, thanks. I think it was Anthony who posted that link, but it was Propaganda who brought up the whole inverted totalitarian shit. So thanks to Anthony Propaganda. All right, I gotta wrap this up. It was nice hanging with you guys. Just don't forget to share, like the video. Like the video, motherfuckers. Appreciate it. Baby Yoda appreciates it. All right, and he's gonna use the Force to make you do it. No, he won't do that because he has respect for you and he knows you'll do it on your own. All right, say bye, Baby Yoda. All right.